Welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall. Today we're continuing our series where we take a look at different dungeon types and figure out how to best use them within our fantasy tabletop role-playing games. By understanding these different locations that we have at our disposal, we can make better choices about when to use them and present them as challenges within our campaigns or for the next adventure that you're planning. This time we are diving into the realm of the enchanted, the whimsical, the mad, the magical. Yes, I'm talking about Wizards' Lairs, an iconic dungeon environment filled with magical surprises. Wizards' Lairs are often shaped by their master's magic, reflecting their personality, their research, their arcane background. These lairs can take many different forms, from a towering spire that scrapes the skies to an underground labyrinth filled with twisting mazes and corridors. And of course, it could be somewhere in between or a mixture of the two. With layers of enchantment and magical defenses to protect their secrets, who would be brave enough to head into a wizard's dungeon in search of magical treasures? So in this video, and as always, we hope to answer a few key questions. What is the purpose of the wizard's lair? When would we use a wizard's lair in our games? What denizens would reside within? What traps are lying in wait? And what treasures can be found within. So with that all said, let's go ahead and break it all down. A wizard's lair is part home, part laboratory of magical study. Some wizards retreat into their lairs to focus on their research, shield themselves from the outside world, or maybe even conduct experiments that would be too dangerous to perform in civilization. Others could use their lairs as bases of operation, directing apprentices, magical minions, or possibly even entire armies from within. A party would probably go explore a wizard's lair because they're in search of something magical or possibly some sort of secreted knowledge. The party could want to meet the wizard that lives there, or maybe take something that's within their possession. If the party's headed to an abandoned lair, it's probably more of the latter. In an active lair, the spellcaster is still present, meaning that the dungeon is fully functional with its magical capabilities. Challenges presented in an active lair mean that the magic will be much more potent. No failing wards or shifts in arcane reality. You get the idea. Additionally, if the original wizard is the one that's occupying the lair, then this means that your theme is probably pretty straightforward when you're designing your dungeon. Alternatively, if you've chosen to have a second wizard come in that has taken over the first wizard's lair, then the party's intelligence on that location could leave a lot more room for twists. For example, say the party knows that an illusionist once lived there. Well, now it's a necromancer that has moved in. They could be in for quite a surprise if they see some sort of undead thinking it's an illusion, only to realize that it's not. In an abandoned wizard's lair, the original owner is gone. They could be dead, missing, or even ascended beyond mortal understanding. However, the remnants of their magic probably lingers. Constructs and experiments might roam the halls. Magical traps could still remain armed, and the structure itself maybe is starting to become a bit unstable due to arcane decay. If new occupants have moved into the lair, I would still classify it as an abandoned lair if it isn't a new wizard that's come into the scene. You could have another humanoid move in, or any different type of monster really that would utilize the dungeon more as a home rather than a magical laboratory. Unlike some of the other traditional dungeon types we've talked about, a wizard's lair is a place where you can involve a lot of magic into your design. You don't have to, of course, and of course you can add magic into your other places, and you should, but in a wizard's lair you would expect it. It doesn't have to be just a series of rooms or corridors like you might see in a normal dungeon. It could be a space warped by magic, designed for the wizard's needs and their, navigational purposes within their own chambers. It can make it a little more confusing for an adventuring party trying to go in there, but if you're invading someone's space, then no one said it was going to be easy. I think your wizard's lair should embrace the flavor of your wizard's expertise. If you have an illusionist, then there should be elements of illusion incorporated into the dungeon design that the party is going to have to deal with. If the domain belongs to a summoner, well, they're probably going to have several different summoning chambers or binding circles and so on. Now, not everything in your lair has to be over the top with the wizard's specific flavor, but I do think it should be present, enough to telegraph what possible denizens, traps, or exploration opportunities await within that dungeon. Now, all wizards are probably going to have their own unique layouts for their domains, so there's no hard guidelines on what to include in your wizard's lair, but here are some of the common structural elements to consider including within it. Libraries. Most wizards will have a collection of texts for their research. These could include magical tomes or magical scrolls with utility to the party. Laboratories and experiment chambers. Dangerous places where potions bobble, constructs clatter to life, and magical forces threaten to break free. These are always fun and provide a lot of good interactivity for your party to explore with. The inner sanctum. This is kind of the wizard's personal chamber of study. It's sort of the heart of their lair and likely where you'd find most of their valuable treasures hidden within the lair. You can include things like elemental or thematic chambers. A fire mage might have halls of molten rock, while a necromancer's sanctum could pulse with eerie green light and whispering spirits. Arcane gateways. You could have a series of teleportation circles that offer movement throughout the dungeon, or alternatively, the gateways could lead somewhere else entirely, perhaps a different city or another plane of existence. And lastly, bedchambers. If the wizard's lair is their home, they're going to need a place to sleep. This is also probably another spot where there could be some valuable treasures kept by the wizard. This is potentially optional, of course, if your wizard is of the lich variety and no longer needs to sleep. Of course, there are lots of other different types of rooms that can be incorporated into your wizard's lair, but hopefully that gives some good ideas on what common elements you're going to want to consider adding into this dungeon type. A wizard's lair is rarely empty whether the spellcaster is present or not. Unlike bandit hideouts or monster-infested ruins, the creatures found here can have a lot more magical nature to them. Not that you couldn't in those ones, of course, but you're going to encounter a lot more magic-based creatures in a wizard's lair. In an active wizard's lair, we could expect to see things like magical minions. This could be golems, animated objects, or other arcane constructs that follow their master's will. You can also have summoned creatures, so this could be elementals, water weirds, spirits, or other extraplanar beings that have been bound to serve the wizard. Of course, you can use the apprentice and assistants, so these would be lesser spellcasters, could be alchemists or scribes who work under the wizard, either willingly or under some sort of magical compulsion. You'll likely encounter some guardian beasts, so magical creatures like griffins, displacer beasts, or chimeric horrors that are created through experimentation. Wizard is likely to employ those to physically guard and protect the wizard's lair. Lastly, if your wizard is actually a lich or just a standard necromancer, then the party is probably going to face some undead in the wizard's lair as well. In an abandoned wizard's lair, of course, your monster variety is going to be a lot more open. You can include a lot more mundane monsters if you'd like, or decide whatever kind of fits the story about what's happened there after the wizard has left. But some common tropes would include your rogue experiments. These are once loyal creations. Maybe they've turned feral or their programming has gone bad. Now they wander the lair aimlessly or hunt for intruders. You could have unstable summons. This could be elementals or devils bound by old contracts that are forced to linger even though that the wizard now is long gone. Arcane echoes. This could be things like spectral memories of the wizard's experiments, maybe some sort of strange illusory monsters that have kind of manifested some sort of form. On the mundane side, you can really include any type of humanoid or beast that would make sense to move into the abandoned space. I think one of the fun twists here is have your rather mundane creature become extraordinary from arcane exposure within the wizard's lair. So maybe you have a giant lizard that now gains the ability to phase shift around, or perhaps an ogre moves in and they find an old staff of fire spouting and they wield that in battle. Those are sort of fun twists that the players might not expect, but add a little more variety to the encounter flavors. A wizard's lair is a place of intellect meets paranoia. Defenses here are more than just pit traps and pressure plates. Instead, expect magical protections that confuse, hinder, or outright destroy intruders. In an active wizard's lair, I think there are several different types of traps that you could employ that would fit right into the design. The first group is probably misdirection, so you can include things that are like false doors, shifting hallways, or even teleportation circles with randomized travel, possibly enchanted mirrors that sort of disorient invaders. These are all good ways to kind of confuse or distract anyone that is wandering the halls that shouldn't be. Of course, we've talked a little bit about illusions, but these are great as well. You can have maybe dangers cloaked in an illusion of passivity, so the players go to approach something not knowing it's actually dangerous behind the illusion. Or alternatively, you could have potentially beneficial elements cloaked in illusions that make them look dangerous to keep the players from going into certain locations. You could also use glyphs or wards that evoke some sort of illusory guardians designed to chase intruders away. This is probably a lot more simple and doesn't require the maintenance, upkeep, or food that a real guardian would. Of course, your standard spell traps, so these are your glyphs of warding, your things that trigger fireball spells, force cages, or gravity reversing effects upon your trespassers. And then lastly, you can have things that are a little bit more like living defenses or magical defenses that alter the terrain around them. So maybe you can have walls that grow spikes, or floors turn to quicksand or mud-like surfaces, or possibly even sentient doors that demand a challenge or a problem be solved before opening for anyone at their threshold. In an abandoned wizard's lair, you can definitely include all of those elements. I think the main difference in an abandoned lair is the idea of a little bit more unstable magic. So things might be degrading a bit from what they were, and that can produce unpredictable results, which can make things a little bit more interesting. Within kind of the first types of traps, you can make the magic a little bit more unstable. Lingering spells, they might be behaving more unpredictably. Those reliable teleportation circles now could be sending people places randomly. Maybe objects are randomly levitating, or perhaps time is moving faster or slower in different areas of the dungeon or localized pockets within the wizard's domain. And then lastly, you can include these ideas of corrupted constructs. So once loyal magical defenses have now degraded far enough that maybe they're hostile to anything that moves. So this could be, permanently affixed constructs, or, your actual golems and stuff that move around. I generally consider those mobile constructs creatures, not traps. But I think if you have an explicitly stated way to control or pacify those constructs that now no longer works because the magic has decayed over time, then they definitely become more trap-like. So maybe there's an amulet that you could use to control the golem, only to find out that it no longer works. That's definitely more of a trap situation, even though it includes fighting a monster. Adventurers headed to a wizard's lair are probably seeking one of two things: lost knowledge or magic. A wizard's lair is filled with these arcane wonders, but also great risks. Unlike a dragon's hoard, wealth here is often tied to knowledge, rare artifacts, or possibly dangerous experimental magics. Now, of course, you can and should include your mundane coins, gems, and jewelry. Wizards are usually portrayed as wealthy. This wealth does include those mundane valuables, but you could also include enchanted jewelry or gems among this lot as well. Beyond that, you're going to see your spell books and scrolls, your standard spell books and scrolls that contain the established spells appropriate for your game of choice. And then you could also include magical tomes or grimoires that include forbidden knowledge locked behind these arcane sigils detailing rituals or spells that have been forgotten by the outside world. Now, this could be something that your magically inclined players could utilize either via some sort of elaborate ritual Or maybe it's just a new spell you want to introduce into your game, and it's something for them to transcribe into their spellbook. That's up for you as the game master to decide. You can include things like magical components, so rare herbs, enchanted crystals, or alchemical reagents, things that are useful and valuable to those who know how to use them or employ others that do know how to use them to create something new and wondrous. You could have residual magics in the wizard's lair that are valuable. So this could be pools of liquid mana or potent magic zones that can be used by your magic users within the party. These are things that can either be portable or fixed to the wizard's location. And if they're fixed, that could be a reason for your party to come back to that lair from time to time. I think a wizard's lair is a great place to introduce living or sentient magic items. So you can, of course, have your sentient swords, talking statues, maybe self-replicating scrolls, these things with their own quirks and personalities that have kind of been given life via some sort of magical artificial means. And then lastly, of course, if your wizard is high enough power, there can be great artifacts of power within their lair. I'm talking your famous wizard staffs, maybe a famed potion of immortality, or perhaps some sort of really powerful magical tome. These are all great things that could culminate in sort of a grand prize for a magic user once they are strong enough to undertake the trials of this dangerous wizard's lair. As you can see, there's lots of great magical items to include in a wizard's lair. I'd select treasures that align with the theme of your wizard. So a necromancer probably has a staff made out of bone, but you could also include treasures that constitute gifts from friends, allies, or underlings. And then lastly, of course, you can adjust accordingly if it's no longer the original resident within the wizard's lair. Maybe the new inhabitants have brought along their own treasures, or perhaps some of the wizard's treasures are no longer present because they've been previously looted over time. The wizard's lair is one of the most unpredictable dungeon types in fantasy. The heavy magical nature of them allows you to take them in a lot of different ways and unexpected avenues. Whether the party is breaking into an active wizard's fortress or exploring the remnants of an abandoned magical sanctum, these places offer immense danger and incredible magical rewards. Expect to face strange creatures, unravel arcane mysteries, and contend with magics that defy the laws of reality. So the next time your adventurers stumble upon a lone tower in the wilderness or a hidden sanctum beneath the city, be prepared, because the greatest threats in the wizard's lair are those beyond the bounds of reality. What are your favorite wizard's lairs in tabletop RPGs? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. This video is a part of a series where we are taking a look at all sorts of different dungeon types. So check out the playlist on the screen now if you want to see others that I've already covered. Consider checking out my monthly newsletter, Enchanted Nimbus. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.